St. Francis details spirituality for all and all time. Volume 2, Meditation by Fr.Kalathil Mathew Msfs. Chapter 1, Meditation and Mental Prayer. On true devotion, St. Francis de Sales says, true devout life is virtue most acceptable to God's divine majesty. One should thoroughly understand wherein the grace of true devotion lies. There are many spurious and idle resemblances of a true devotion. The one true devotion is only to God. If you do not know what is true devotion, you may make mistake. One man sets great value on fasting and believes himself to be leading a very devout life so long as he fasts rigorously, although the while his heart is full of bitterness and while he will not moisten his lips with wine, perhaps not even with water. In his great abstinence, he does not scruple to steep them in his neighbor's blood through slander and detraction. Another considers devout because of the great number of prayers he recites every day. It is a scrupulous life if one does not refrain from all manner of contempt, anger, irritating conceit, or insulting speeches among his family and neighbors. This man freely opens his purse in almsgiving, but closes his heart to all gentle and forgiving feelings towards those who are opposed to him. But in fact, all true and living devotion presupposes the love of God. It is called charity when we love God earnestly, and it attains its fullest perfection as it is accepted by God Himself. Charity leads us to a general practice of all God's commandments. Devotion leads us to practice them readily and diligently. True devotion makes us to do good carefully, frequently, and promptly. Persons who are devout fly to God frequently, promptly, and freely. St. Francis de Sales says, in order to be good, a man must be filled with love, and to be devout, he must further be very ready and apt to perform the deeds of love. Devotion consists in a high degree of real love. It makes us ready, active, and diligent in following all God's commandments. It excites us to be ready and loving in performing as many good works as possible. The difference between love and devotion is just that which exists between fire and flame. Love, being a spiritual fire, becomes devotion when it is fanned into a flame. Devotion adds to the fire of love, and that flame makes it eager, energetic, and diligent, not merely in obeying God's commandments, but in fulfilling His divine counsels and inspiration. Devotion rouses up to do as many good works as we can, promptly and lovingly, even though they are in no way commanded, but only rather counseled or inspired. All may not be able to live a life of contemplation. All are welcome to lead a life of perfection. Francis de Sales says devotion is the sweetest of sweets, the queen of virtues, the perfection of love. Love is the milk of life, devotion is the cream thereof. If it is a fruitful plant, devotion is the blossom. If it is a precious stone, devotion is its brightness. If it is a precious balm, devotion is its perfume. Even that sweet odor which delights men and causes the angels to rejoice. St. Francis de Sales says, devotion is suitable to every vocation and profession. A different exercise of devotion is required of each vocation and profession. The devotion which is true hinders nothing, but on the contrary, it perfects everything. And that which runs counter to the rightful vocation of anyone is is, you may be sure, a spurious devotion. Aristotle says that the bee sucks honey from flowers without damaging them, leaving them as whole and fresh as it found them. But true devotion does better. It does not hinder the manner of vocation or duty. It adorns and beautifies all. It is just like when we throw precious stones into honey, and each will glow more brilliant according to its several colors. The Old Testament furnishes us examples of people who led a devout life. They are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, David, Job, Tobias, Sarah, Rebecca, and Judith. And in the New Testament, we read of Saint Paul, Lydia, and Crispus, who led a perfectly devout life in their raids. We have Saints Anne, Martha, Monica, Aquila, and Priscilla as examples of household devotion. We have Cornelius, Saint Sebastian, and Saint Maurice among soldiers. Then we have Constantine, Saint Helena, Saint Louis, the Blessed Amadeus, and Saint Edward on the throne. And we can even find instances of some who fell away in solitude, usually so helpful to perfection, some who had led a higher life in the world which seems so antagonistic to it, and we can find instances of some who fell away in solitude, usually so helpful to perfection, some who had led a higher life in the world which seems so antagonistic to it. As Saint Gregory mentions, Lot, who was chaste while living in the city, was defiled while in the desert. No matter where we are, we can and we should seek a life of perfection. Need of a guide is urgent for those who would enter upon and advance in the devout life. St. Francis de Sales advises to have a guide for those who want to excel in their devout life. When the Blessed Teresa read of the great penances performed by Catherine of Cordova, she desired exceedingly to imitate them, but her confessor forbade her to do so. Yet she was tempted to disobey him. Then God spoke to Teresa, saying, "My child, you are on a good and safe road. True, you see all this penance, but verily I esteem your obedience as a yet greater virtue." And thenceforth Saint Teresa so greatly loved the virtue of obedience. She took a vow of special obedience to a pious ecclesiastic, pledging herself to follow superior. This way of obedience is to be there in the parish, family, working field, society, etc., for its smooth running. Many pious souls have subjected their will to God's ministers in order the better to submit themselves to Him, a practice much commended by Saint Catherine of Siena in her dialogues. This practice is recommended to all those who want to grow in devotion to God. A faithful friend is a guide. A faithful friend, we are told in Holy Scripture, Sirach 6:14 and 16, is a strong defense, and he has found such a treasure. A faithful friend is the medicine of life, and they that fear the Lord shall find him. We especially need a faithful friend who will guide us by his counsel and advice, thereby guarding us against the deceits and snares of the evil one. He will be as a storehouse of wisdom to us in our sorrows, trials, and falls. He will be as a healing balm to stay and soothe our heart in the time of spiritual sickness. He will shield us from evil and confirm that which is good in us. When we fall through infirmity, He will avert the deadly nature of the evil and raise us up again. So, we must earnestly desire to advance in the spiritual life under the guidance of the spiritual guide, who is a heaven-sent angel to you. We must look to God because God speaks through the spiritual guide. The spiritual guide needs to be full full of love, wisdom, and discretion, for if either of these three be wanting, there is danger. St. Francis de Sales says the very first step towards spiritual health is to be purged from our sinful humor. St. Paul received perfect purification instantaneously, and the like grace was conferred on St. Magdalene, St. Catherine of Geneva, St. Pelagia, and some others. This kind of purgation is not as miraculous and extraordinary in grace as the resurrection of the dead in nature, nor dare we venture to aspire to it. The ordinary purification, whether of body or soul, is only accomplished by slow degrees, step by step, gradually and painfully. The soul which rises from out of sin to a devout life has been compared to the dawn, which does not banish darkness suddenly but by degrees. We need to be brave and patient in this undertaking. Let us not be disheartened with our imperfections in the work of the soul's purification and the path towards the perfection. First, purification. St. Francis de Sales says we must begin with self-purification. The first purification to be made is from sin by the means of the sacrament of confession. Seek the best confessor within your reach. Use one of the many little books written in order to help the examination of conscience. Read some such books carefully, examining point by point wherein you have sinned, from the first time of your reason to the present time. Strive to detest them and to reject them with the greatest abhorrence and contrition of which your heart is capable. It is good to write down the result of your examination of conscience, so that we may not forget at the confession. Bear in mind these four things: that by sin you have lost God's grace, rejected your share in paradise, accepted the pains of hell, and renounced God's eternal love. So prepare well for a good confession. Avoid the occasions of sin and take the necessary measures for amendment of life. A general confession forces us to a clearer self-knowledge, kindles a wholesome shame for our past life, and rouses gratitude for God's mercy. Second, purification. St. Francis de Sales says the second purification is to be purification from all sinful affections or attachment to mortal sin. There are penitents who forsake sin, yet without forsaking their sinful affections. We must abstain from the pleasures of sin. Do not look back to sin which we have already left. If you look back like Lot's wife, then we are like a sick man who abstains from eating melon when the doctor says it would kill him, but who all the while longs for it, talks about it, bargains when he may have it, would at least like just to sniff the perfume, and thinks those who are free to eat it are very fortunate. St. Francis de Sales says, if you seek to lead a devout life, you must not merely forsake sin, but you must further cleanse your heart from all affections pertaining to sin. Souls which, in spite of having forsaken sin, yet retain such likings and longings, remind us of those persons who, without being actually ill, are pale and sickly. Such souls will lose all the grace of their good deeds. St. Francis de Sales speaks about how to effect this second purification. The first inducement to attain this second purification is a keen and lively apprehension of the great evils resulting from sin, by means of which we acquire a deep, hearty contrition. Contrition, however, slight, when joined to the virtue of the sacraments, purges away sin. When our contrition is strong and hearty, one will avoid every affection, every link and tendency to sin. Kindle our contrition and repentance as much as we possibly can, so that it may reach even to the very smallest appearance of sin. Look at Mary Magdalene. When converted, so entirely lost all taste for her past sin and its pleasures, that she never again cast back one thought upon them. David declared that he hated not only sin itself, but every path and way which led thereto. Thus let us renew our souls. St. Francis de Sales teaches us the use of the following meditations carefully in order to attain this realization and this contrition. If we practice them steadfastly, they will root out both sin and its affections from our heart by the grace of God. Here below we find the Salesian or Francilian way of meditation. It has 5 steps. Third and fourth steps can be together. Each saint has a different method of meditation. These are only sample meditations here below. One can make these meditations personally. Take only one subject a day for meditation. Reflect on it during the rest of the day. Learning how to do the meditation and lead a holy life or to lead a devout life is to find out the light in us. Jesus told us first, I am the light of the world. Later he told us, you are the light of the world. One should live according to the light in oneself after finding the light in oneself. Every Christian needs a half an hour of prayer every day, except when he is busy, and then he needs an hour. St. Francis de Sales.